Today's webinar is titled, Is Your Website Converting Traffic to Leads? Simple, Objective Ways to Evaluate. Thank you to our sponsor, the Energy Network, for being able to provide this webinar for our audience members. Build a Green is presenting this webinar on behalf of the Energy Network, which is a local organization created by the CPUC that provides resources and assistance to homeowners, businesses, and public agencies planning energy efficiency upgrades serving the Southern California region. These services include community education and outreach, such as these webinars, rebate and incentive offerings, attractive financing terms, and tools to help identify contractors that have been trained in energy efficiency. Additional resources help homeowners take the next steps towards saving energy. Today's presenter is Peter Trost of Energy Circle. Peter leads the Energy Circle team and is a passionate advocate for the home performance industry. He drives innovation for both Energy Circle Pro suite of web and marketing tools built exclusively for companies in the home performance, HVAC, insulation, energy auditing, and low energy building sector. He contributes to the popular Energy Circle blog for home performance professionals nationally and is a frequent presenter at national conferences on topics of energy efficiency, marketing, and communication, use of social media, and energy monitoring. Today's webinar is going to focus on your website with simple, objective ways to evaluate if it's converting traffic to leads. A few learning objectives we have for this webinar are to understand how to measure and track conversion rate, learn about proven ways to boost conversion rates, and understand the potential upside of better conversion rates. With that, please join me in welcoming Peter.
Thank you very much, Leela, and good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Get my screen showing. And Leela, I'll just look to you to make sure that the view is okay. I'm going to go to full screen mode. Looking good?
This looks great. Yes, right, you're good to go.
Good. Well, great to be back with all of you. Really enjoyed the last one of these, and excited to talk about this topic because I think it is, one of my favorites, and what I hope I'll show you is a fairly highly leveraged way to be thinking about your marketing and improving your marketing. This notion of conversion. So Leela already put up this slide, but I hope if we're not already connected on LinkedIn or whatever your sort of social media platform of choice is, that you'll connect with me. And just a little bit about the credentials from which I can speak today. We work with about almost 350 now home performance businesses across the country, lots in California, but lots in 49 other states or 48 other states besides California. As a result of that, we have a ton of data. We can see that how things are performing for all manner of home performance businesses. We sort of think of the term in the big tent sense of the word of contractors of all flavors, raters, auditors, etc. We have a database of about 12,000 specific search queries. In other words, the exact search term that someone sits down at a search engine and uses as relates to our industry. And we've done tons and tons of experiments. And so that's the kind of cred from which I can talk about this today. Probably the thing on this slide that I'm most proud of is that our client base, we think over the years, has done about, at this point, about $560 million in home performance work. So that's our kind of internal metric of our own success. So what I want to talk about today in this kind of realm of this discussion about conversion and specifically getting at the question of, is my website performing? Because this is something that, I talk to tons and tons of contractors, and this is the thing that I think most often comes up. I'm not 100% sure that my website is doing what it is as well as it could be doing. So we'll first just sort of define what we mean by conversion, and I'll show you some numbers just to give you a sense of what I said earlier, which is there's a lot of leverage and a lot of gain to be had when you can improve conversion rates. We'll talk secondly about how to measure it, and then we'll sort of go into some very specific ways, proven ways to improve your conversion rates, and conclude by, talking about sort of the one key component of an event, in a conversion event, is that call to action, right? That invitation to a potential customer to do something. So that's the agenda, and as Leila said, I love questions. So as as we're going along, please feel free to to chime in, and if she feels like it's worthy of interrupting me while I'm going, I'm happy to happy to do that. All right, so let's start off with what is it and why is it so important? And just to be clear, it's a pretty straightforward metric, right? The conversion on a website is of the traffic that you can get to your website via all manner of different tactics. What percentage of that traffic turns into a lead? So the math is very straightforward. Traffic divided by leads gives you a conversion rate. And it's important to say here, and we are talking about conversion on a website and conversion to a lead, but as all of you know, the end game is not a lead and what you pay for a lead. The end game is converting that lead into a job, and that's the math on which we really want to measure our marketing effort needs to be on that basis. But for purposes of today's discussion, what we're talking about is this process of getting, of growing your leads, capturing your leads, and today, almost all of those tend to happen through your website. We'll talk about the way they're converted, but it tends to happen regardless of kind of where it is on in a visit to a website, and then either a phone call or a completion of a form. So the way, again, just to go a little more granular on how conversion happens, you have a call to action. We're going to talk more about that, which is essentially an invitation to someone to leave their name for you. Typically that happens on a conversion page, or sometimes we call it a landing page, and I'll talk more about that as well. And that's what generates a lead. And sometimes it comes in a form, sometimes it comes in a phone call. A few contractors I know are experimenting with online chat, and that can be another form of a lead. But that's sort of the basics of how conversion happens. Generally speaking, it's our experience that it's the two sort of workhorses of lead conversion are the telephone and a form. And we're pretty big believers in giving people choice. I'll show you in just a second. There seems to be a preference of kind of general audiences across the home performance space for the telephone over form completions. But these are the workhorses. And as I said, some folks are experimenting with chat. I think being in California, all of you need to think about that. It is sort of a methodology that is of the more sophisticated technological kinds of people, and so you obviously have lots of those in California. So it's worth considering. Our experience so far has been that the online chat cannibalizes the phone, and most contractors I know are really anxious to have that phone ring, and they really want that opportunity to kind of have a one-on-one. But those are the two main, kind of main ways that conversion happens. Across a whole lot of contractors for whom we kind of do tracking, this is the split between the number of leads that come via the telephone versus a web form. It's almost 70-30, a little bit north of 70-30. In this case, 71% on the phone. And so, what the implications of this are, that you really need a system of some kind for tracking the telephone, because the vast majority and preponderance of leads are actually coming via the phone. And so there's some ways to do that. We could talk about in the Q&A if you'd like, and I'll show you kind of one of the systems that we use that make it automated in terms of that tracking. And of course, many companies that are doing a good job are trying to do a good job of capturing when a phone call comes in, what the source of that lead was. But very important to this discussion to know how dominant the phone tends to be in our industry. So I wanted to just sort of give you a real-world case study, and this is an East Coast contractor, a very successful home performance company. And what I'm trying to do here is kind of get your minds around the sort of business upside of improving conversion rate. And so just walking through this sort of chart, this is monthly traffic to this particular contractor, about 1,625 visits. And so for purposes of kind of measuring the before and after, I've kind of locked down the traffic. This is just assuming no change in traffic. In this case, before we kind of supported them on this, their conversion rate of traffic to their website from all various forms was about 7.7%. We were able to accomplish about a 1.67% jump, so up to 9.39, 22% increase. And what that did is move their leads up from 125 a month to 153, so 27 more leads. If we, again, fix the conversion rate of the leads to jobs, in their case, and this was 12%, remembering we're talking about the conversion of a name that comes across the internet to actually getting to a job. So 12% is a pretty good number. What that translated into is essentially 3 more jobs a month. At $8,500 average ticket size, that's an incremental gain of $28,560 kind of month over month for that, for what seems like a relatively slight bump in conversion rate. So this is to my point about how highly leveraged this concept of conversion rate is and how incredibly valuable it can be. When you put $28,000 or $29,000 of incremental revenue on the top line, there's some investment, obviously, opportunity there that can go into how you make that conversion rate improve, and it's very, very worthwhile. And conversion rates, once your systems are set up well, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next section of this, tend not to go down, right? It's not like something you kind of have to continue to spend money on. You get your site functioning well, and that's very likely to be a consistently improving number. A lot of people ask me the question of, well, what should my conversion rate be? This is a smattering of clients that we work with, all home performance companies of various flavors across the country. And this was June data in terms of their total conversion rate. So of all traffic to their websites, I guess on the low end here at the bottom, you had site number 6 was just north of 6%. You had a couple of blockbuster opportunities, site 5 at almost 15%, which is really quite remarkable. Site number 3 at 12. So this is a pretty good range. I would say that 5 to 15% is pretty good. And as we get through a couple more slides, we'll talk more about different types of traffic and what you should expect for different types of traffic. But to sort of just ground us on what is possible, this is out there. Now, most folks that I work with that come in without a particularly well-tuned approach to conversion, kind of a routine website that they got up and running and haven't been super focused on, most likely their conversion rates are in the kind of 1% range. So these are numbers that you might expect if you were kind of on your game, focused on conversion, focused on your site, etc. Again, just a little bit more to the potential upside, and again, this is imaginary data in this case, but I think fairly realistic. 600 visits a month, which is for a small website is not atypical. A 5% conversion rate from leads to jobs, an $8,500 average job size. And you get a sense here of, what kind of gains you get in revenue from improvements in conversion. If you're at 1%, you're sort of, barely, it's a fraction of a job coming through the website. It's $2,500, not very exciting. You start to get into 5%, and you're starting to produce some decent numbers. But you get up to where I just showed you some numbers are really potential of 8 and 12 and 15%, and you can see that there's kind of real money here. So this is just trying to numerically make the case for my point that investing in improving your conversion rates has a pretty direct payoff in terms of top-line revenue growth. All right, so how do we measure this stuff? Let's go there next. As I mentioned, the two forms that we kind of typically are trying to track are lead forms and phone calls. And the easiest and kind of simplest and lowest cost way to do this is to set up your Google Analytics, this amazing metrics program that underlies your website, hopefully. And if you don't have analytics set up, it's a fairly straightforward thing to do and very, very powerful and free, by the way. Imagine, I always analogize this to those of us in kind of building science who who go into a home on a particular day and run a pressure test and run some duct testing and maybe look at some energy metrics in this kind of one slice. The Google Analytics is a blower door set up in a home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. It's really kind of phenomenal. So getting that set up, properly is the ticket. And the way to do that is to set goals in Google Analytics. And this is I'm a little bit tutorial here, and this may be kind of on the geeky side, but the point I'm trying to make is it's not that hard. You go into kind of goals in analytics, and you can kind of name it, set a goal, and basically what's happening is that you are measuring the visits to the page that happens after the conversion event. So you've got a form, and that form, after you submit it, has a thank you, and so that thank you page is what we define the success of that goal as. Nobody can get through to that thank you page without having completed the form, and that's how they kind of come through. So pretty straightforward and not terribly difficult for non-technical people to set up. Very easy, by the way, for smart technical people if you've got a web person that you rely on and so forth. What that then gives you as you look across your analytics traffic is just a stunning amount of amazing data. And what you see here, and I'm looking at basically traffic by source, so where that traffic came from. Either Google CPC means paid search, direct means they typed in your web address, organic means they found you via some search term, which might have been your company name, or it might have been Energy Audit Los Angeles, Bing, paid search, social, etc. And you get a sense here of looking across this data that, how many people came through, how many of those were new users versus old users, how many pages did they look at, what was the duration of time on there. But most importantly, the stuff I've outlined in red, when you get those goals set up, you can see on a running basis that we've got a 10.26% average conversion rate, very strong, and you can see how that's made up, right? So direct, meaning those people typing in your company name, is the strongest, and that makes some intuitive sense. But organic and paid search at 8% is strong, and then socials down at 2%, which is kind of what you expect. And then in turn you've got, all right, this produced 72 leads came in over the course of this particular month from those pieces. So that's the power of getting it set up properly and seeing these kinds of metrics, because it is really the kind of the holy grail. There's some other super interesting data once you have these goal conversions set up. In particular, when you look geographically at where your traffic is coming from, and I used a Cincinnati contractor here to kind of make this point. You see some anomalies in the data, like this one community, Loveland, converts it to almost 22%, versus kind of others. That gives you a lot of market intelligence about, where you're kind of best suited and maybe where you ought to be focusing more. Or alternatively, if you looked at Mason and said, hey, 7.5 is not good, we want to focus more there, that's a place to focus. So again, once these goals are set up, there's just a ton of rich data that you can learn about how things are performing. Now, as I said, with the importance of phone calls, the platform that we like a lot is called CallRail, and it's not expensive. It's typically about $35 a month, depending on kind of your volume and so forth. So it's not prohibitive. And what it does is then kind of key a unique phone number in a way that is compatible with the way Google wants it. And therefore, we are able to get complete tracking of all of the phone calls, and even and you can see in the data here, you get what the source was. In other words, it came from Google Organic, or it came from Bing Paid, or it came from another website. You have the phone number itself, you have the duration of the call, and you even get some indication of of what the keyword was. So somebody in Bing typed insulated garage doors, and kind of came through. And there's recording associated with this and so forth. So it's terrific for metrics and really rounding out the data that I'm talking about. It's also really fantastic just from the kind of standpoint of having a recording of all phone calls and how your team's doing and so forth. So highly recommend that. So now let's sort of segue a bit into sort of some of the proven ways to boost conversion rates, right? So thinking back on some of that data I just showed, if it had no change whatsoever in traffic, and of course that's another lever that we're always going to want to be focused on, growing traffic. But if you just started off by saying, let's just live with the traffic we've got and try to get our conversion rate up to try to get some of those boosts, what are some of the ways to do that? So the first and probably most important thing is the relevance of the page to where that visitor came from. So, so if I clicked, for example, on a paid ad that was for air conditioning repair, and I got to a page like this, I would feel like, okay, I'm in the right place, right? This is the air conditioning repair page. There's a call to action which says 24-hour, AC service. That's what I needed to hear because, I'm broken down right now. Whatever it may be, that sort of relevance is the most important thing. And this can be challenging, right? Because traffic is coming from a variety of different sources. We don't always control where that traffic lands. And I think one of the typical things that's so often we find is that a lot of traffic goes to your home page, right? It's not necessarily to a specific page. And so there's a lot to be done to kind of make sure that this is happening. But even if the traffic is going to your home page, just be mindful of that whole question of relevance. Where did that traffic come from? What was on the mind of that person who clicked? And did they, did they come to a page where where they find, okay, this is what I was looking for. This is where I'm home. A good example, by the way, I couldn't find an actual page for this, but I know in California that there's a reasonable amount of traffic comes from the Upgrade California site, energy upgrade site, and so this is a good example of if the link is coming through to that, consider not necessarily sending that link to a home page, but send that to the page about the upgrade program, right? Send it there so that people feel comfortable. I clicked on that directory link. I'm there. Yes, we participate in the program. Yes, we understand how to get you the maximum amount of incentives, et cetera. So first point is relevance. The second, and this we've found by, frankly, by testing, is third-party validation. And so, this I think is especially true in home performance, where what we deliver is not especially well understood by lots of homeowners. This kind of whole house notion that all of us have invested in as our kind of futures of our companies, most homeowners don't quite get. And so this idea of a third-party endorsement, in this case, delivered in a video of a couple that had got a remarkable change to their comfort and energy savings and so forth in this particular house, had a very significant lift in terms of the kind of overall performance of this page. And we've tested, by the way, both the same exact page with video and the same exact page with like a still testimonial, or just a written testimonial, and the video performed really well. So those are sort of 2 points here. One is that third-party validation is very important. The second is that video seems to be a really kind of helpful thing from a conversion standpoint. This is really interesting. So one of the kind of conundrums these days on the web is that Google really likes long pages. And when I say Google likes long pages, what I'm referring to is that we track rankings of how well certain pages do, and long pages, sort of literally north of 2,000 words, tend to perform better. And this is an interesting case study that we found. It's actually in some Scandinavian country, and so I don't know what the page says. But what's interesting is this is a page about energy audits, and so it is it's in a foreign language that none of us understand, but it is a very much in our zone. And this is a control. You see the shorter page on the left versus this long page on the right, and that long page generated 63% more conversions than the shorter page. Now, one of the things to be really clear, if you look at the top parts of this page, the top hasn't changed, right? So that person who might be intimidated by too much content doesn't have to scroll down to the bottom, but those that did apparently, were able to convert at a kind of much higher rate. And you see this is, it's a pretty well-designed page, right? Even though there's a lot of copy here, it's nicely sectionalized, it's broken up with sort of good headers, it's got, images to sort of point to and so forth. So pretty interesting, and just, again, one of those things like we all have kind of been taught that people on the web kind of just want to scan content, and here's, proof that in certain cases, long can be good. And by the way, my opinion on this, and it's a pretty well-formed opinion based on some real-world experience, is that long associated with complicated topics or confusing topics is where you want to be thinking about that and explaining what really happens in an energy audit, since so people are so misunderstand that whole thing called an energy audit. It tends to be a good example of where long might be a smarter move. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is attention ratio, and I couldn't really find a website in our industry, but this is one that I saw some data on out in the internet, which is, and when we say attention ratio, how many options of things are there to do on a website in relationship to what you really want them to do, which is, in this particular case, is take the free trial. And somebody kind of looked hard at this website, and which kind of scrolled on for quite a ways, and it was an attention ratio of 130 to 1, meaning there were 130 other things you could do in addition to the conversion event thing that we want them to do. And so very distracting and very, very hard to kind of make things work when you've got that bad of an attention ratio. The ideal, of course, if you're a super hardcore marketer, is you have a attention ratio of 1 to 1, meaning that you get people to a landing page where there's really only one thing to do. You're not distracting them with other links. You're not distracting them with a navigation bar. We've all seen this kind of page. We've landed there at various times in our lives. I'm not saying you have to go here. I'm just saying that this is, you think about this attention ratio thing, and 130 to 1 being bad and 1 to 1 being kind of perfect, it is sort of a straitjacket on your user, right? It's not terrific. So I don't necessarily think you have to be that crazy, but here's a pretty kind of decent example, and it's not in our industry, but it's good. As you see on the left, get the ultimate guide in the upper right, and then down below there were links to 3 ebooks, 3 webinars, and then 3 social links, either the Twitter, Google Plus, or Facebook. That took, that lower bar added basically 9 more things, so the attention ratio went from 1-to-1 to 10-to-1. And apparently was that much more distracting because when they lopped that bottom of the page off and went to an attention ratio of 1-to-1, they grew their conversions by 31%. So again, I'm not, I sort of cautiously recommend that you kind of be that sort of radical or hardcore about a kind of a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's a very instructive thing to be mindful of if you are trying to get conversion. Don't give people too many kind of alternative routes or ways to kind of get distracted. Now, here's an example of kind of, that we've done of a sort of an example wireframe of a, of a kind of an ideal world sort of landing/conversion page, which I'm going to talk more about in a second. And just the pieces parts here, are first and foremost that headline, unique selling proposition or offer. And that's the place where you've got to nail that relevance piece first, right? That it's, the headline has got to say, all right, I clicked because I was interested in this thing called Healthy Home, and here I am on a Get a Healthy Home audit page. So headline is super important. Below that, and then the reason I just have a blue box is there's all kinds of ways to do this with video and with text and so forth, is the context, right? This is where you're going to add more information to kind of to round out the piece. Third, and you'll notice it's number 3 is kind of high on the page, is this notion of proof. This third-party endorsement. In this case, a sort of word style testimonial. 4 is a bit more detail about the benefits. So what are the benefits of this? 5, of course, is vital, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Is the actual call to action and form and phone number, the place where that where that conversion takes place. And then 6 down below are the trust indicators. And what's really interesting about that is, even though your typical homeowner has no idea what BPI is or what it means to be BPI certified, we have proven time and time again that the existence of that symbol, regardless of people's understanding of it, lifts conversion rates. So, and that's kind of proven across all kinds of e-commerce things and so forth. So those are sort of the 5 kind of elements, if you will, or 6. Look, I got 6 when I said 5. Sorry about that. Of a winning landing page. Headline that's got a good offer and a unique sales proposition, context, proof, benefits, call to action, and trust indicators. So those are, and you'll have this, so you'll be able to kind of look more about this. One of the things that comes up a lot in this discussion is this notion of a landing page, which some people think of as a kind of a distinct and separate page that you might use in relationship to a specific campaign. So you've got a little ad effort going on, and you're going to send all that to a landing page. In our view, and this is proven out again in the performance, if you can merge together your key service pages with the conversion elements to make that page an ideal conversion page, that is the best of all possible worlds. You're not, in the case of this one we're looking at, it's a mechanical ventilation page. You are not splitting that traffic up, or in other words, sending part of your kind of traffic to your main mechanical ventilation page versus the campaign going to a separate one that's a landing page. So if you can merge together the conversion components, meaning the call to action you see on the right, improve your indoor air quality, and the other kind of basic features that I talked about, that tends to be a very, very powerful kind of approach. So not always easy necessarily, but really important. And I would just add one thing to this, which is you'll notice, and we'll start, this is a good segue into the next section to talk about specific calls to action, is this call to action is not generic, right? It is related to the page that we're on. So improve your indoor air quality is obviously related to mechanical ventilation. and that has proven to be, that kind of contextual call to action has proven to be a really strong performer. All right, so now let's go to that whole discussion, which is which is calls to action in home performance and kind of what works. And so I love this. Call to action is as simple as that directive that you are offering up to the user of your site to kind of do something. And it's sad as it is sometimes to admit this, we as humans tend to be fairly kind of rudimentary, I think, in terms of responding to very specific things. That's why those late night infomercials are all about, call now, call right away, do it now, because sad as it is to say, those things actually work. So again, just a little bit more. Call to action is the part of a marketing message that attempts to persuade a person to perform a desired action, right? It's it's the invitation to take that action, or sometimes it's the text or the button that specifically advertises that offer. So the button might have a message associated with it, and those are all, in both cases, those are calls to action. It's very important, I think, to as you think about calls to action, to keep in mind that it is an exchange of value. The person who decides that they are willing to kind of fill out a form on your website is doing so knowing they're giving something up, right? They're at risk that you're a super aggressive sales organization and will never, never let them go. They are definitely giving something up, but they're doing so because what they expect to get back is of equal value, right? They expect to get good information that they're interested in. They expect to get, have a conversation with a company that could be the solution to the problem that they've got. They're going to get something of value. So very important to have that kind of mindset about it, because you want to have a valuable offer in exchange for what is a pretty valuable thing, meaning someone's name and contact information. So good offers in home performance, I think, start from that very premise, which is you got to give something, you got to give to get. And so we know that there's a fair amount of suspicion amongst homeowners. The data shows this around the believability of energy savings. Clearly for California, given the program there, people come into this saying, I want to take advantage of that program, and I want the rebate. So making it clear that we will help you, we'll walk you through this, we'll get you the maximum amount of money you can have coming to you. Clearly, anything free, and sometimes I really dislike using the term free, but again, it works. Free phone consultation, I think, is often a very interesting thing. All of us know that some kind of phone qualification happens when we're trying to understand a lead and whether or not they're, whether they're good or not. So we're inevitably going to talk about what their issues are, what kind of envelope, situation they have. Do they have insulation in the attic? What's the state of their systems, et cetera. And so there's a lot, you give a lot in that phone call. You give a lot of kind of free consultation without seeing the house. And so why not call it that, right, instead of something more basic? Again, depending on your own business model and how you approach it, sometimes a free evaluation, a free walkthrough. Again, we'll see in just a second that a lot of times, I think especially companies on the envelope and insulation side, it's been so standard to say free estimate, and free estimate can be a very costly thing if you drive a long way for a lousy lead. So putting a different kind of flavor and name on that can be good. As I said, these action words, timing words, and value words tend to be the ones that really perform, and I don't like to necessarily admit this about my fellow human beings, but call now, buy today, register right away, anything that can be related to expiration, things that have limited time offers, being very directive with what you're asking someone to do tends to work really well. Usually a call to action, has sort of 4 kind of components to it, right? This is a little old, so I know the numbers aren't quite as rich as 8,000 anymore, but you've got, a value statement, right, which, in this case, get up to $8,000 in rebates is a pretty exciting and, pretty attractive offer, and even at $6,500 or whatever, it's still very attractive. You've got the relevance component of it. In this case, the old Energy Upgrade California logo, which has some awareness and so forth. You have an offer. In this case, it's free phone consultation, and then you've got the action, which in this case gives the choice of either the telephone and or click here to do it on the web. So those are kind of the component parts. And just to be clear, there is no right or wrong about this, but I would just ask you to think about what you've got. And this is, so classic amongst insulation company sites in particular is, free estimate, free estimate, free estimate. So it's a bit of a conundrum, right? If everybody in insulation offers a free estimate, you kind of have to do so yourself. At the same time, if you're all the same, what is it about your visit to that house that could be differentiated beyond just what exactly everybody else does? Depending on your market, you can have some playfulness with this. This is, a contractor in the Northeast who's in a fairly kind of, progressive part of the country. Is your home a Hummer or a Prius? Click here to schedule your free phone consultation. I thought this was a pretty good one, and it worked really well. We guarantee real savings. Our team of experts will guide you through the process from audit to financing, end to end, and guaranteed real savings. It's a pretty strong offer. Obviously, we never want to build our brands around these programs because they can go away. But when you've got, exciting financial things, this is a Connecticut deal where contractors got reimbursed, $800 for a copay of $75. Pretty attractive, right? 75 gets you 800. Pretty interesting. And yet, some people, may, and then, then you see down below, click to schedule an audit. I think very often companies that do audits tend to rely on that schedule button, maybe a little too much, because, very often the homeowner entering into this space is trying to figure out what the heck we're talking about when we say energy audit versus kind of being ready to schedule it. So you can have different calls to action at different points in the process to help people. If someone read your full energy audit page, like that long one we just looked at that point, maybe it's appropriate to say, click here to schedule. So that's the summary. I'm going to stop here. We talked about, some of those metrics about why conversion is so powerful, how to measure it, the whole issue of kind of improving conversion rates, and then the kind of question of calls to action. So I will pause there and see if, Leela, if we've got any questions queued up or anything I can clarify.
Yeah, actually. Thank you, Peter. That was really informative. And so you had mentioned a little bit earlier that Google likes longer pages of 2,000 plus words, and that long and associated with confusing topics is something that's good. But then you also mentioned that 5 elements to winning a landing page are to include context, proof, and benefits detail, which in my mind could be summed up in one third-party endorsement video. So what do you think is a better option if you can kind of concise and get it combined into one video that kind of details everything about the program or the offering, or take a little bit more time and effort to then expand and use that really 2,000 plus words to kind of detail out what you're offering?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's sort of the, it's the age-old sort of conundrum that I tried to point out, which is this sort of balancing act between, the component of your website that serves this robot, which is Google, right? It comes by and sort of just does an algorithmic check of your site, and then the real human beings. And I think, that particular piece of data I showed about the long energy audit page, that was real people kind of converting at a 63% higher rate, to that. So I don't think that the long page option is necessarily contradictory to the kind of key elements of the page. What's critical about long page usage is the design of that page, because you have to accommodate both the user who just wants to cut to the chase, as well as the user who may be willing to kind of read through something much longer and kind of go all the way down to the to the bottom. So on the point about video, Leela, I think remember we tend not to kind of count words, right? If we say 2,000 word pages tend to perform well, often there are lots of words in a video, even short ones, right? And one of the things that can be done and has proven to be very helpful is you can get transcripts of videos. I'm blanking for the moment on the name of the company, but very, very inexpensive, like $2 a minute for transcriptions of your video. So you upload them, and 48 hours later you get a transcript that we found to be fairly accurate. I think it's called SpeechPad is the name of the service. So one thing to do with the video is marry it up with the full transcript, in your HTML on your website, which kind of serves that long form content in addition to kind of getting you the benefit of the video. So that's another way to do it. One guy that I respect a lot talks about this from the standpoint of friction. So in other words, if there's a service that you sell that tends to have friction in this case could be, I just don't really understand the service, or it's complex, or it's expensive, or whatever that kind of point of friction may be, that's the place potentially to dedicate these long pages. And then the last thing I would say on the whole long page question is understand your audience. One of the things that we really like to do, we talked a little bit about it in the last webinar, was get into, really think through who your website is serving, right? Who your kind of core audiences are. And sometimes we call this persona development. And all of us, I think, know that one of the key, sectors that has been kind of early adopting of the home performance concept are, folks that are highly educated and or kind of more technologically adept. And so, all of us kind of know that guy, that customer you've had that's a software engineer that's, in his early 30s, is smart, has done a ton of homework, has been all over building science, .com and read all kinds of stuff about building science, and thinks he knows more than you know, very, very educated. That kind of audience, that educated audience, the engineers and more technically kind of technical professional type audiences, those people are willing and kind of want more. And so the trick, of course, is to balance the need of that audience with the need of, let's say, your aging in place client who's just wants to kind of cut to the chase and say, are you going to can you make this a comfortable house that I can live in for the rest of my life?
Right, that's very, very interesting. And then would you be able to touch base a little bit on global conversion rate versus individual conversion rate?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that in that one slide. So global, in this case, I assume you mean, all traffic to the website. So, most often the key drivers of traffic to a, home performance website are going to be organic, meaning people using search terms; direct, meaning they know your company, they know your URL and they type it in. And then it kind of falls off from there, depending on whether or not you're taking advantage of some of the paid search opportunities. Companies that are more aggressive on paid search, that can often be their #1 source of traffic. So of those big ones, we generally get really solid conversion from both organic and from paid, and there's a distinction between those two. So organic traffic, right, is someone sits down and types in Energy Audit Los Angeles, they find your listing, they click through, they look at the page, they have a good experience with that page, and they make the decision, yes, I want to contact this, this company. Organic is so naturally happening that, that tends to be really, a positive thing, because they found you, your page ranked well, they found you, they had a good experience, they clicked through. Part of the reason that paid works, and it works a little bit differently, is that people who are clicking on ads tend to have more buying intent. This isn't necessarily a kind of casual surfer of, hey, this guy, what's an energy audit? This is like, I want one, I'm clicking on an ad, I sort of know I'm clicking on an ad, and so that additional buying intent tends to kind of boost that conversion, a little bit. So direct is almost always the best performing, and then the social channels, and we see this both directly on the website as well as kind of measuring from Facebook advertising, is definitely lower, and I think it makes sense, right? That there's such a sense of kind of, I don't know, frivolity and lightheartedness in Facebook as a kind of a general medium that you can get a lot of impressions very inexpensively. You can really do a lot to build up your brand awareness there, but your expectations about conversion rates from that channel should be kind of lower, sort of more in the kind of 1.5 to 2 to sometimes 3%. So, but blended all together, something in the kind of like I said, 5 to 15, maybe center of the bell curve 10% is really is very achievable.
Great, thank you for that information. I'm going to leave the screen up for just a little bit longer. If anyone in the audience does have any additional questions, definitely take advantage of having our expert Peter Trost with us, because he will most likely be able to answer any question you have. With that, I want to tell you guys that we have a few upcoming trainings coming up in Hawthorne. They are home performance sales trainings with another sales and marketing expert, Mike Rogers. We have 2 dates that are available, September 15th as well as October 22nd. For more information and to register, you'll just follow this link, which is www.salestraininghawthorne.eventbrite.com, and you'll be able to choose between which date you'd like to attend. Very great training here, so please take advantage of it if you are in the Hawthorne, LA area. I'd like to thank our presenter, Peter Trost. I have his information up on the slide for you in case you didn't grab that earlier on in the presentation, but please contact him if you have any other additional questions, or if you'd like to know more about Energy Circle, please visit their website. Great information there, and you'll probably be able to see some great examples of good conversions that will happen from traffic to leads on their website. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar. I hope it was informative to you. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. It's always great to have you and your expertise on this matter. We will see all of you guys at our next webinar and presentation. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you, Leela.
Bye, Peter.